This seminary is a theological seminary that shifts, makes transitions. It liberates. It forces you to not just speak and be considerate of the person's spirit, but of person's situations. This is an institution that seeks to make change, that seeks to set free those who are oppressed, and who seeks to transform one by one from the inside of the institution to the outside of the institution. I tell you, if you come to the Samuel DeWitt Proctor School of Theology, you will have no regrets.
Embrace the challenge.
Enjoy the journey at the Samuel DeWitt Proctor School of Theology
at Virginia Union University.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to the April and probably May and maybe June version of the Dean's Conversation. I am so excited to have all of you to join us tonight as we engage in what's going to be an absolutely amazing conversation. I'm looking forward to what God will say to us and through us tonight. I am John Guns. I am the Dean. You can see it on the screen. I am the Dean of the Samuel DeWitt Proctor School of Theology of Virginia University. And I am honored to have my partner in the work at Virginia Union, an amazing lady. She does tremendous work. I'm going to let her introduce herself because I don't think I can do justice to who she is.
Well, thank you. As you affectionately know, I call you Bishop, but thank you, Dean Guns, for inviting me tonight. And I look forward to chatting it up with you and having some engaging conversations around our topic today, the narrative, looking at changing the narrative around education. And so again, I look forward to that. I've been with Union since September of 23, and I am blessed and privileged to work with you and the other deans in collaboration as we continue to serve Christ and to lift his banner high at the corner of Lombardi. So again, I look forward to being with you tonight.
Actually, this is our first attempt to forge in a very public way what we've been talking about for the last few months.
Yes.
And so as the dean of the School of Education at Virginia Union, and someone who, you always impress me as knowledgeable. I mean, I just, every time I listen to you present, it stretches me because you clearly understand what you're doing. So share with me or share with us your thoughts about or what is your philosophy of education? And I know that you have some listen, she's an educator. She works at Virginia Union, so she's got slides. She's got slides. I ain't got no slides.
It's okay.
She got slides. She got slides for both of us.
Yeah.
So what is your philosophy of education? And then what is your understanding of it? And then you just kind of walk us through what you're thinking about and what you were thinking about in preparation for tonight.
Sure. I may do the reverse, right? I may share with you, as you and I discussed, as we continue to pray about what it is that we feel is relevant right now, right? What is the relevancy? How can we engage? How can we collaborate around education and around really our children? And so I feel like that is what was the impetus for our discussion. And for me is my passion for the children, especially brown and Black and other marginalized children, people, as well as we know, Christ would consider those the least of them, right? And so for me, the time, the climate, the political, economic, social climate is, for me, almost at a boiling point, right? And so daily, we are being confronted with challenges to who we are, to our culture, to the education process. I have a long history. You mentioned in terms of some of my philosophy, it's been really formed around my public school background. My previous position, Dean, was at the Virginia Department of Education, and where I felt privileged to serve our Commonwealth as a assistant superintendent of teacher ed and licensure, responsible for ensuring that the teachers were prepared, the teachers and schools had quality individuals working there, and that the programs and curriculum aligned with that which the state and the school board have identified. And so I have a long history with public education. But in this time, right, I am struggling tremendously with where am I? Where should the School of Ed position themselves with some of what really we call a crisis, really? And so looking at how can education be that tool to liberty, to freedom, right? So that's really also at the cusp of my philosophy, thinking that the understanding, the education, having abilities to read and write and articulate your thoughts, right? And create the story for yourself and your family have been central to my philosophy of education, as well as a developmental process and building and looking at how we can build each other, right? And how I can serve you and lead and as well as provide instruction and teach you, right? And so oftentimes we know Scripture also has taught us, right, about the parent's perspective, the parent's responsibilities with children and education. So my faith has also shaped my philosophy of education and bringing in parents and incorporating the community and engagement in any sort of educational process. And so tonight specifically, to try to bring it home, the topic that we chose for me really came out of my reflection, especially in Holy Week, right? We're reflecting on the resurrection and that new season. And so we are too, right? Potentially in a season of reflection, understanding where we've come from and where we're going. And so I thought it really was a timely discussion. And so also the narrative, who is telling that story, Dean Guns, and who is responsible for telling the story? Right. We think even about the story of Christ, right, in resurrection, and that there are different perspectives on that. And so for me, that's playing out as well in the media, in our educational realms, right, in the reform and agenda right now with political as well as in education. And so as we think about that, right, I challenge myself. As I said, I'm struggling with, so what is my responsibility and what is the School of Education's responsibility at Union specifically, right? And so I'll share a little bit. I think as I questioned that, I started to put myself and think of my role as dean, right? And what authority, right? And what is my call, right? What is my accountability in the dean of education? And so I thought quickly about an assignment that I actually do, Dean, that helps me help our students get engaged with the political, the economic and societal nature of education. And so one of our early assignments in our program at the undergrad level is, in a basic intro class, is that they look for current events, right? And so you can imagine what some of the current events have been over the last couple of months, right? Right. And so for me, I've tried to use that. And even tonight, I thought that would be a quick way for us to get started a little bit. So I've got one slide, the second slide, that, for example, these are some of the news lines, right, and narratives that have been playing out that my students shared that really align with our topic tonight. So recently, Forbes magazine is highlighting Project 2025, saying, here's how Trump's executive orders align with Project 25. And that the author of that, the leader from the Heritage Foundation, says that it was beyond their wildest dreams that the president adopted Project 25. Another headline, lawmakers try to tighten rules after most homeschool vouchers funds went towards non-academic expenses. And the last one at the bottom highlights School Choice Week, right? Just a few months ago, school choice in Virginia, as we talk about specifics in terms of our locale, highlighted a national recognition of school choice just a few months ago. And how many of us were aware, right? So these examples for me almost translate into the narrative that's playing out right in front of us and within our schools, within our families, and even in our communities and potentially in our churches, right? So the narratives, who's telling the story is really, I think, where we landed on that topic. Who's telling the story and who's responsible for telling the story? And what obligations do we have to tell the story of our own children, right? Whose voice, right? Who's passing on the legacy to our children, right? That look like me and you, and children, brown skins, right? All children, rather. So that really prompted me. This particular exercise really helps me work with our students, for one thing, but I also think it reminds us of the narratives that are playing out in our news and in the newspapers and things that we're reading. And for me, again, I think the point of our discussion is, so let's challenge ourselves about who is writing the narrative and should we challenge those narratives? And I think that's what I want our discussion, one of the outcomes for our discussion tonight, Bishop, to be, is around, so let's challenge ourselves about some of these narratives, some of the storylines, some of the news lines, some of the policies that we hear so often. Next slide. And so, of course, we got to use data, as you said. We want to take a look at some data. So I found quickly, the U.S. Census data indicates that since COVID, post-pandemic, more families are choosing homeschool for their children, right? The rates for white households increased from 5.7 in the spring of 2020 to 9.7% in the fall of 2020. Asian children homeschooling rates increased from 4.9 to 8.8 during the same time frame. And then we take a look at the data for Black children, and we see that the U.S. Census reported that the data reveals that the number of Black children who were homeschooled rose from 3.3% in the spring of 2020 to 16.1% in the fall of 2020. Now, again, I'm not an expert on the data, but some things that probably jump out to all of us, right? There are probably a matrix of reasons why this is happening, again, post-COVID. But some of the things that come to mind, even from my position at the State Department, the removal of Black history from the curriculum, right? The often debate around removing, and even it's highlighted now. The banned books that are many authors or stories that focus on the African-American child. And then implicit bias or systematic racism. We talk quite a bit about the factual school to prison pipeline for children of African-American descent. And so a lot of parents are making decisions that now they want to homeschool or they want to take more responsibility for the training, the education of their own children. Now,
not like that, because you're saying something. Because I wanted you to do what you're doing. I want to go back to that slide.
Okay.
Because in a few moments, we're going to bring on a pastor who has led a school, whose church has been leading a school for over 28 years. What does this data say to somebody who is a skilled, seasoned educator? Because one of the things I've been doing is I've been just tagging educators that I know.
Yes.
Right? What does this data say to you? And what is the trend that this data is suggesting to us?
Sure. So I think the real takeaway is the increase in that more African-American families are taking ownership, right, for the education of their children. And as you say, the flip of that is that they are removing them from public education, right? Right. So whether they believe that their child wasn't receiving what they needed, or that they were being stereotyped, right, or treated unfairly, they chose to remove their child and felt like there were better options.
Now, question, because you're really pricking something for me.
Yes.
Question, and you can put it back on the screen, Ray, because I think this is important. What will happen to the public school system?
Yes, that's one of our biggest concerns, and mine as well, right? As I said, a wrestle. And so a consequence, right, that data is really showing is that obviously the best and brightest brown people, children, if they're removed, right, the resources are not going to go to the public schools because one, the numbers are not going to be there. Oftentimes, and I'm not an expert, but I do know that resources are allocated to schools based on enrollment and various other factors, SES, et cetera, right? But the tax base. And so if our best and brightest are removed, that means one, the numbers are low and that the resources are not going there. And so what does that mean for the teachers, for the students? And so oftentimes that's one of the biggest arguments, right? And for the proponents of public school is that the public schools were created to provide some consistency, right, for creating a democratic society or a democracy, right, across all cultures, across all SES levels. But as this data is showing, and it's in the point that you're making, is that there seems to be some changes there. And so what does that mean for the public school when this happens? And what does it mean for the educators, right? Mm-hmm. Who remain because of that dedication, because they believe many Christian, I've worked with Regent University as well as here, many Christian educators really believe that that's their ministry, that's their calling, right? That is their first passion, right? Working with the children of the future, and really feel called to do so as their main primary ministry. And so many of them stay, but that often leaves them in a very challenging scenario, right? Without support from resources, parents, etc. So that is one of the major criticisms of this movement. The other thing is, I feel like oftentimes parents, right, may not be aware of all the options and resources, right, Bishop? That's the other thing. As I think about what the School of Ed potentially could do, there are quite a few options. And I have some other information that I'll share with you about some other policies in the state of Virginia that I'd like to share. But I do feel like that was critical. Obviously, that's one of the reasons why I shared that data. And so I know some of our public school educators are cringing when they see that. Because they know how this will ultimately affect them and ultimately affect the schools and the other children that will lose out without having some of the best and brightest with them in the public schools.
So let's make a pivot. If we see now black and brown parents saying, I don't trust the public school system anymore.
Right.
We see a trending towards privatization. And listen, for those who are watching, I want to encourage you to do two things for us right now. One, I want you to share this, especially with other leaders, pastors, board members of churches, people who are involved and engaged in education at any level. I want you to share this because tonight we're going to begin the conversation. Dean Johnson and I have made a decision that we're going to work together to empower the Black church and the Black community. Her wealth of understanding, and she can sit there and try to be modest if she wants. The sister's brilliant, but her wealth of understanding is, see, she's shaking her head. And plus she's you're a Delta? Yeah, okay. Her wealth of understanding about this is why I trust her so. But I now want to bring on someone I've known, 25, 26 years. We pastor in the same region. He is my brother, but he's a skilled pastor that's been doing skilled work. And he is an example of, he was way ahead of us in terms of this idea of a Christian school, but his church, over 20 some years ago, he started a Christian school. He started a school. And so I want to welcome Dr. Gary Williams, the pastor of the Hopewell Church. I want to welcome him to join us now. And welcome, as you see, Dr. Williams, I now consider myself I consider myself an educator now. So, I didn't bring my slides, but I got a set of slides too. The slides were amazing. Thank you. Gary, begin by sharing with Dean Johnson and I why a Black church 28 years ago, am I correct?
That's correct.
Would begin this process of educating Black children. And now, over 28 years later, your school is a model in our community for how that work is done. why. And then, of course, I'm going to turn over to Joan, and you all kind of have a little dialogue. But again, everybody keep inviting. Thank you. I see people now reaching out to others and inviting, because this is such an important topic. And these are the kind of topics that we as Black church leaders need to be having conversation about in light of what we saw as the data. You know, so Pastor Williams, talk to us.
Well, first of all, let me begin by saying thank you, Dean Gunn, and then also you, Dean Johnson, for just this opportunity to share this platform with you. I think what you guys are doing, I pray that you continue this, because this is a conversation that is sorely needed within our community, within the time in which we live. I've been the senior pastor of Hopewell Church for 35 years by God's grace, with one church in 2 locations, in Duval County as well as in St. Johns County. One of the things that led me to start a Christian academy, our school, was the fact that I really felt as though that it was important to integrate faith and learning. Part of that was because of the things that I experienced growing up. Dean Gunn, I think you're familiar with some of our narrative. We have built 2 churches in predominantly suburban communities. And so just racism, just the vitriol comments on and so forth. That was something that when you go through something like that, first of all, you never forget. I was familiar with the struggles of my grandparents, somewhat of the struggles of my parents. But then when I faced it, one of the things I say about African-American people of color, you perhaps you've never, if you've not experienced racism, you will know it when you experience it. So it really came home. And so I said, I think one of the things that the Lord led me to do was to make sure that we could expand our border and our platform. And that's not just ministering to people on Sunday or on Wednesday, but my aim at that moment was to have holistic ministry. And that was education, that was inspiration, that was economics. One of the things that we have in the blueprint of our church is to build a senior housing facility. The aim is to empower people of color and people of faith, beginning with the Word of God, but moving out from there. And so one of the things that I've aimed to do, and one of the things that my father taught me years ago, is that the difference in people is exposure. And so the aim was to expose our young people to as much as we could, to as many things as they could, and to be on the tip of the spear when it came not only to inspiration, but also education. And so the aim was to have holistic ministry, is to encompass as much as we can in order to better people of faith, helping us to be better people in the community, and then helping us to just be better people in general. So that was kind of the start and the spark that lit the flame.
Love it. Love it. Dean Johnson, what are your thoughts and what you want to offer and what questions you may have?
Sure. I again appreciate you sharing today as an example. And it sounds like this is nothing new for you, sir. You have been constant in being that example in your community. And so I think some of us may be listening for the first time, hearing about this and wondering, well, how would you start, right? And maybe again, you know that your story is specifically for you, but just share a little bit. But how did you start, right? What kinds of things did you put together to start launching a school?
Well, what we did was we started with a preschool, and the aim was to build the school up. Actually, we go to the 7th grade.
Okay.
And for us, in the demographics where our school is in a predominantly, it's in the suburbs is where it is. There are A schools all around us. Our elementary schools are A schools. The middle schools are A schools. The high school is an A school. Mm-hmm. So there's a lot to compete with. But one of the things that I believed in is that if we could create a niche we could stand out and then maintain our enrollment. So one of the things as we started out, the aim was to start with retired professionals,
Okay.
paraprofessionals, those who could volunteer their time, those who were former educators who could come in, whatever that they could offer. That's what we were looking for. You know, of course, I think in many schools, payroll is the biggest expenditure.
Sure.
And so that was one of the reasons of trying to get those who have been retired professionals, educators who wanted to give back to their community, give back to their church. So that was one of the ways that we started. And then the aim was to make sure that our children were doing things that that were not taking place necessarily in the schools around us. For instance, for those who started in preschool, for those within our community, well, a lot of those children, they play in preschool. Well, not our kids play as well, but our aim was to build a phonetic understanding of words and to get them reading and understanding phonics, you know, by the time they got in first grade.
So I like that. I like that. Okay. Yeah.
You have just won yourself a fan, Gary Williams.
Yeah. So the Literacy Act, love it with literacy.
Right.
Yes. Okay. Well, again, I know that you're speaking from your experience, and others may have had different experiences, but we appreciate you sharing today. Well, then, the flip question is, Dean, well, so tell us about some of your challenges. Maybe share a little bit about maybe one or two challenges that you've experienced with the school.
You said one or two?
I know. Just one or two for today.
How about 7 or 12?
Really? One, it's a balancing act of one is payroll, to be honest. And one of the things that, we aim to do is to make, there is this adage, you pay for what you get.
Yes.
And so the aim is you want the best teachers, you want the best educators, but at the same regards, you have to offer, proper compensation.
Yes.
And so that depends upon the number of students that you have. Every year, the numbers fluctuate.
Change. Yes.
Yeah. So, so we've had to be creative in doing this is, just thinking outside of the box, doing fundraisers prior to the school year to make sure that we could draw the teachers and then also pay the teachers, a good pay.
Sure.
That was one of the things we had to do. In that process, we've also had to offer them, insurance.
Yes.
So, we've had professionals who have volunteered their time, those who have been a part of STEM programs. We have those who've come in and who have taught foreign languages. They will teach them Spanish.
Sure.
And so it's kind of a smorgasbord. It's crazy. It's a smorgasbord of things. But I do believe that I've always believed this, that it is something that we have to do. Okay. So payroll is always one. Retention sometimes is another. We've been blessed with retention. I think one of the other
teachers or of your students?
Of both at times.
Okay.
Of both at times. And because sometimes, and let me speak on that for a moment, you can get a teacher who is good in the interview, but then when you get them in the classroom, it's not panning out. And so then you have decisions that you have to make from there. So it's a plethora of things that you have to deal with. But I think once the goal is clear and the vision is clear, and if there's enough people that buy into it, you can make it work. And by the grace of God, we've done that.
Did you tell us how large is the staff at the school? That give us a little bit of a peek inside.
There is about 21 staffers altogether.
Okay.
21 staffers altogether.
Okay. So if you had to share some wisdom,
you had
to share some wisdom, if you were going to give a takeaway to inspire, encourage, motivate what would you share with those that are listening now?
I would share that the ends justify the means. It is not for the faint at heart. And I want to go back in one of the slides that you put up, and especially the slide for 2020 when the homeschool went up.
Yes.
That was, and I remember that vividly because actually in March of 2020, we were shutting down. We had to shut down both the church and the school.
Right, for COVID. Mm-hmm.
That's exactly right, for COVID. And one of our greatest challenges with the school was we made sure that the kids had the resources. But one of the greatest challenges that I saw is that parents were not equipped
Yes.
to help their kids. And so a lot of our kids suffered, even from our school. I saw this happen, not just with our school, but with other schools. And so, but the challenge there is that I think there has to be buy-in with parents and teachers. This is what I've seen over the course of the time that we've done this, is that sometimes the teachers are all in, but the parents, the buy-in from the parents is almost, and I'm just being honest, that we've had to chase the parents to get them to do what we felt they needed to do to make sure that this kid is not just, at baseline, but our goal is to make sure that they are above grade level. So that's one of the greatest challenges. I think another challenge, takeaway is that the teachers now have to do more. They are not only instructor, and I'm just being honest, but sometimes they have to be counselor, and sometimes they have to be surrogate parent. Mm-hmm. And so we have to give them the support that they need in order to do that, to make sure that these kids are not falling through the cracks. But then the success stories are when the kids are, we start our kids, we try to get our kids reading, at least understanding their phonics by the time they get in the first grade. What we have seen is, as our kids in preschool they're speaking in Spanish, they're listing all 50 states, they know the presidents, they're doing all of these things. Once we highlight them, the parents are actually drawn to the church. The parents a lot of times unite with the church, and then it gives us the opportunity to build a greater bond with parent and child.
Yes.
And that's when we see the best success with the kids. So when the child is drawing the parent in, and then that's when we see that connection, we get a lot of traction there.
Excellent.
Let me ask both of you this question, because we've got maybe about another 10, 15 minutes. Let me ask both of you a question. And Dean Johnson, from the perspective of the academic leader at the highest level, and then from the space of not only the pastor of a significant church, but a community leader and community activist. In looking, Dean Johnson and Pastor Williams, at where our country is trending in terms of your understanding of education, I'll start with Dean Johnson as our academic leader. What is the role of the Black church in education now?
Sure.
What do you perceive as the role? And then Pastor Williams, that's the same question given to you. Yeah.
Well, we look at history as we think about the future. And so the Black church has always been central to education, right? I would say we all have probably become a little bit more compliant with allowing others, right, to lead in the instruction of our children, to be honest, right? And so that is church. That's our families. The examples that you've given are the same examples in the public school, right? Mm-hmm. You would hope that it would be different in a Christian school, but I too have worked with Christian schools, and it is the same. So I think it's about prioritizing our children, right, Dean? And getting understanding. You know what? Last week, my word was about getting understanding and wisdom, right? That we need, right, to get understanding about how to help our children, and how to come alongside educational institutions and work with them. And so that could be, for example, creating Christian schools, right? That could be working with training our parents, right? There could be preparing the educators for Christian schools and for public schools. There could be leadership in helping to support many of the children that pretty much are fatherless now, right? Or orphans, right? And coming alongside them and being that strength and leading. I do feel that our priorities, but again, I think the education system is often the micro of the macro, right? So I think in general, as I said, our country, our culture, we have given away the right to educate into what the content is of our children. And some of us would say because they don't feel comfortable, because they didn't have a good experience, right? That's what I hear from parents, right? I'm being honest, that they didn't have a good experience. And so how can they train someone else? Which is true, right? But how can we now, as you're saying, Dean, my role as Dean, what kinds of programs can I create? What kind of collaborations in our community could I help make individuals or church members or schools? How can I help them, come alongside them to help engage, right? And to raise the priority of our children and the education of our children. And not that I have all the answers, but at least bringing people to the table to prioritize. How do we get to a place that we all can agree on, that we want our children in terms of education?
That's a phenomenal answer. Dr. Williams.
And I concur with you, Dr. Johnson. I think it was well said. You hit several things, and I don't, some people are not, some churches are not prepared to start a Christian school.
Yes.
It's a daunting undertaking, but
yes,
everyone is not built to do that. But something that you said, and I wholeheartedly agree upon, is that I think we collaborate where we can. One of the things that I think, and how we do that, is before you can overcome an objective, you have to define the objective first. And so once clear objectives have been defined, then it gives us the opportunity to determine where we can fit, we get in where we can fit in.
yes,
I think there are a lot of well-meaning people. A lot of people want to, when it comes to this, they have a heart for our kids and they want to do something, but they don't know what to do. The challenges with that is that energy with no direction leads to chaos. And so when you've got people all over the place and they don't know what to do, then ultimately they fizzle out.
yes.
So if we can identify if it's an after school program, if we can identify if we can have a Christian school and collaborate among ourselves and our community to start.
Several churches, for example, several churches.
Yeah. That and that, so it doesn't have to be monolithic. It's not just one way.
Yes.
But I think it's clear that once we define the objective, and then now we begin to put the scope and sequence together in order to accomplish that. That's when we can get something done. And then the final thing I want to say is this: we can't afford to pivot too late. In many instances,
It's too
we're
late.
walking into places when other people have left. It's too late.
Correct.
So with all of what we see taking place in our society and in our country, listen, denial is not a river in Egypt. It is happening.
Yes.
It is happening fast. And so we not only need to be active, we need to be proactive in trying to determine what are the things that we can do, bringing our educators together, bringing our community leaders together, and seeing what we can do to help our Black and brown kids.
Can both, first of all, I don't know if those who are watching understand how significant of a moment this is. I've been doing church for 40 years. I've been pastoring for over 35, 2 different places. I've worked with youth ministries in the state of Virginia at one point for 3 years. I traveled all over the city, all over the state, rather. This conversation is so significant because oftentimes as Black churches, we don't think proactively about education of our children. We volunteer in schools, and we do that rather well. But to actually take on the weight that you've taken on, Pastor Williams, and then Dean Johnson, for someone with your background and your expertise and your years, to commit to an HBCU at this stage of your career? You know, and we all know that there are certain unique challenges that come with working in HBCUs. First of all, what I heard, and I wrote it down, and I shifted, you know, Joan from being the dean of Setting with Practical Theology to being a pastor.
Sure.
And what I shifted towards was, and both of you kind of alluded to it, churches coming together to create a school. And Gary, you use a big word. You don't have to be monolithic. And I think that what many of us fail at is an understanding that maybe none of us can carry it alone. But 2 or 3 churches coming together under the leadership of a Dr. Joan Johnson, from the advisorship of a Gary Williams, that, you know, I'll throw out a name, Leofa Thomas and Jeff Rumlin, and Rumlin's watching. So, you know, guys who I am immediately in that location with them. Us Open Arms and Dayspring and St. Paul come together. We create a school now. Jeff already has one. But what I'm saying is that we have an opportunity to do something significant. So I want to propose this. I want to propose, Joan, that we go back and we think through what we heard tonight or what we're hearing tonight. And then, Dr. Williams, maybe you come alongside what Dean Johnson and I created as a pastoral advisor, because I think that what you understand, and her question was spot on, what are the challenges? I think what you understand in sustaining a school for 28 years, that do you know how long?
Right.
28. Oh, I can tell you know, because I see that gray hair. When we used to play golf, Joan, we would play golf a lot. We don't play because he won't take me out. But anyway,
that's because I got this bad knee. That's what.
Oh, Pastor.
We used to play golf, and neither one of us had gray hair. Now, but it's interesting. The Black church is the answer. We're not willing to raise the right questions.
Yeah.
So let me kind of, I ramble, but Joan, let me hear from you and Gary. Let me hear from Dean Johnson and Pastor Williams. How can collaboration occur from your end as a dean of the School of Education? What do you bring? And from your end as a school founder and leader of 28 years of this work, what do you bring? And then for those who are watching, maybe some of you will have the courage to say, maybe this is how I take advantage of a night like this. So Dean Johnson and Pastor Williams, and then that'll be our last question for tonight. And then I'll kind of close by giving where we go from here, Dean Johnson, because I think that we're on to something.
Yes.
That we can't let up on this. This can't go away. This may be what saves a generation of Black kids who are being told that their story doesn't matter. Yes. Maybe we decide that the story matters by building out the kind of schools where we tell our own story and we build our own sense of self. Dean Johnson and then Pastor Williams.
Sure. So what I hear as we're talking,
Wow.
I certainly believe the collaboration is the key. Now, for me as the dean, what I believe also is important is that I am aware that there are several options, right? So maybe it's not the school, as Pastor Williams said, but in the state of Virginia, right, there are certain policies, right, that I am somewhat aware of that relate to maybe 5 or 6 different choices for schools, right? So we're talking about Christian or private schools, but the state has 6 or 7 different options that they consider choice. Some school divisions have magnet schools. There's homeschool, right? There are other types of options that the state considers choice that I feel like education, unpacking those would be helpful, right? To the community, to parents, to church administrators, right? To our community, to Black churches, right? And then they could find themselves, right? Which of those choices, what are some other ways to change the narrative, right? Back to our topic. What are some ways that we can change the narrative for our own children? How can their voices be heard? So again, the school is one, but there are some other options in terms of how to educate our children. The other thing, I think we at Union should be leading in training the educators, right? Or at least providing some certificates, Bishop, or some training programs that would specifically address needs about how to create charter schools, how to create Christian schools, right? Are there some other resources, right? So one of my strengths is that I try to learn the policies and procedures of the house, and then I try to use them to find the way to solve issues, right? So if I can learn enough about the funding for private schools, if I can learn enough about privatization, how can we use those tools for our own good, right? So for me, that's one of my strengths. And so in my experience, I have some connections with individuals that have expertise in those areas. And that we could, again, that collaboration model of bringing some people together. And I think really we could just start with really trying to understand what are some different pathways to achieve this. And how can churches collaborate with some educational agencies? And maybe they're not universities, maybe they're different types of educational organizations that can help us. Are there some Christian school, private school associations that have resources? Again, have we tapped into those things? And so some of my experiences have been with some of those associations. And so just off the top of my head, those are some things I'd share, Dean.
And also, I think that's good. I concur once again with everything you said, Dr. Johnson. I think, and two things to kind of simplify that. And what I heard you say, I think we need to work be knowledgeable within the system, but also work out of the system.
Okay.
Everyone is not going to go necessarily to a Christian school, but if we know where the funding is going, and we can make sure that we're educating parents pertaining to, be it school choice, privatization, whatever,
right?
If we know where the dollars are going. So I think you work the system from both sides, from within as well as from without.
Yes.
But I also think that as you're navigating the system and working the system from both within and without, it's important to understand and to pinpoint the need. One of the things that I've learned in ministry, and this is something that is just a no-brainer, that needs create ministry. Ministry doesn't create needs. And so when we determine what the needs are, now we can build the objective pertaining to what we aim to do for our kids, what we aim to do for the parent. And therefore they are clear on that. We're clear on that. They're clear on that. And then I think that it allows people to now choose the direction that they want to go in. And so the objective has to be clear. As I said before, energy with no direction leads to chaos. I've been a part of many organizations and groups where everybody was excited and they knew we had to do something.
Right.
But when the mandate and the vision wasn't clear, then what you start seeing is that people start waning away, falling away. And what happens oftentimes, even though the cause is good, the commitment is not as good as the cause. And the reason being is because people can't clearly see, the objective. But I think you said it. I think you said it best.
I want to say thank you to both of you. Well, Joan, you, Dean, and I, we were co-hosts tonight. So I invited you into the School of Theology to be my co-host.
Thank you, sir.
But I want to thank both of you. You have started something, and we're going to return in the next couple of months because I want Dean and I to be able to bring together our unique schools, theology. Dr. Gary Williams is a leader in the church, not only in the Jacksonville and St. John area, but a leader across this country. And so I want to thank you both. I believe that what is meant for evil is going to backfire on them, and it's going to produce a new generation of scholars. That while they're trying to weaken us,
right,
they're going to discover that we have always been innovative. We took pigs and made and made whole
Yeah.
meals for months, right?
Yeah.
We took
Delicacies.
slavery, right. We took slavery and figured out how to become landowners coming out of it. We've always been innovative. And so I want to thank you both. And transparently, when I became the dean, one of my greatest supporters was Gary Williams. He would send me for the first few months, he would send me almost a weekly text. Let's say, hey man, checking on you. You all right? Praying for you. That's all the text would say.
Yeah.
And I would respond. And a lot of times,
and Dr. Johnson, you see all that gray hair he has now.
Yeah. I know. I'm starting to get my own gray hair.
I was trying to make a point now. And so, but it's interesting, and I want everyone to hear us as we transition tonight. What you see is the bridge between HBCU and the Black church. Mm-hmm. And it's awkward that we no longer are as committed to that bridge, because that's how HBCUs were built and birthed. They were birthed from the Black church.
Black church.
And so now I think we have to re-engage that. What you saw tonight was the genius of the Black church and the genius of the academy, the Black academy. And how when it decides that it wants to have conversation, we ain't in disagreement. Mm-hmm. We're just coming at it from different angles, different sides, and different. Yes. And going back to what Pastor Williams said, objectives. I love that. He is so spot on.
I agree.
That so spot on. And I hate the fact that he made that chaos comment public, because there I can't claim it. It's written. So
well,
thank you all so much.
You'll do so much more with it than I did. So
I doubt it very seriously. So, brothers and sisters, please, when you get off this, share this with people. We had about 400 or 500 views so far, but share it with people. This should go viral. This is the kind of stuff that should go viral, instead of the shouting clips and the hooping reels. All that is whatever it is, but this kind of information from two skilled, spiritual, intellectual people is going to shape you. You will see Dr. Joan Johnson and Dr. Gary Williams again. You will definitely see this tandem again. You guys be blessed. Joan, we need students. Am I right?
Yes, I need students.
A quick blurb about school education, then I'll give a quick blurb about Samuel Whit.
Sure. We have undergrad programs leading to licensure and community-based educators, as well as a master's program in curriculum. We also offer weekend professional development courses and other opportunities. This summer, we're launching some certificates in higher ed leadership, as well as literacy. Dr. Williams, Pastor Williams, and literacy. And so those would be two new certificates that we're going to be offering. And you know what? From this discussion, we may be doing something on Christian school collaboration soon. I feel like that may be one of the outcomes from this as well.
And the Samuel Whit Park School of Theology, we're just here, man, doing the work since 1941. There you go.
You have a slide.
I got a slide. Listen, right now, scan the code. We have over 400 students right now registered in the spring. We are committed to educating men and women to do the work of the kingdom. Our motto under my leadership is embrace the challenge, enjoy the journey. And so we're excited. We got a lot coming. We got a lot going on. And I'm grateful that I get to spend this part of my life's journey with someone as amazing as Dr. Joan Johnson, who also a Dr. Williams. If you ever need a drummer, call
Okay, all right. So he's telling you a little bit too much about me.
I was just going to say, he's putting you all out.
Yeah. Well, I wanted to say she's terrible, but anyway, but neither one of us need to do the musical thing.
Not at all.
So, thank you all so much for joining us. And again, all of you who are watching, please share this. This needs to be heard again and again and again and again. All right. Our school should be very proud of Dr. Joan Johnson. of who you are as a leader. And Dr. Gary Williams, nobody like you. Our city, our region, and our country is glad to have a man like you.
I
And
honor
love
to be with
you and respect you, Prof. All right. We are done. I get
Thank
to
you.
go eat. Amen.
Thank you, Bishop. Thank you, Dean Guns. Thank you.
Look out later. Take care.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.